Hi there, you're here with Simon at English Coach, and today my video is about management of your life for value in tangible and spiritual ways. And basically, this video's objective is to show you how to both add quality and reduce waste from the things you do anyway during your routine and your life. So, the first thing that I want to talk to you about today is food and perhaps your diet and the food that you buy. One of the things that people seem to complain about, especially here in Brazil where I live, but also all over the world, is how expensive food is, how much they spend on food, and how they never have enough money for those luxury items. As Christmas is coming up now, you have a number of items that sort of cost two or three times what you would pay for them out of season, but because it's this time of the year, you need to pay even more money. So instead of watching what you buy or watching how much you're paying out for your groceries at this time of year, usually the tendency is to splurge, which means to spend a lot of money on things that you or the people at your festive get togethers and gatherings are not necessarily going to eat. It's just to be able to say that it was there on the table. And what actually happens in the end is it goes to waste, or some part of that thing is eaten, but most of it's not eaten. Or at the end of your Christmas party, you're throwing out 2 or 3 kilos of good food, of food that you could potentially that people could potentially eat. Now, I'm talking about this time of the year, but we could be talking about any time of the year where you're going to the supermarket and you're conscientiously selecting the things that you're going to eat, and you're not selecting them just by price, knowing that those discount items that you buy for things that have passed their use by date or are close to passing their use by date may not have the same flavor. So you take a nibble at home and decide it tastes a little off, and then you throw it out anyway. Wasn't it better to spend that extra dollar or 50 cents on a product that is going to stay in your refrigerator or your pantry until you've finished it off completely and it's gone through your body? So, actually, from a spiritual sense, not wasting food is important, because when you waste food, you're wasting a resource. You're wasting something that was grown, something that was manufactured, sometimes something that was produced, from these farms or whatever. And then you are wasting that when you don't eat it, when you don't consume that. And it's not exactly just because there are millions of people starving in the world that it makes it wrong. In fact, I think that argument is kind of old, because what one nation has and another nation has is um, almost arbitrary. It's There's never going to be a time in the next 10 or 20 years where we have any kind of equality between countries. The Western world enjoys luxuries that many countries just are never going to have, or they're not going to have in the foreseeable future. Okay, so from the argument of starving, you should eat all of your food because there are people starving. I say that's one way of looking at it, but it's not the correct way of looking at it. The correct way of looking at it is, you have this resource, it's there to sustain you, use it. and don't waste it, because waste is if you think about what happens to food, good food, when you throw it in your waste disposal or in your garbage bin, whatever it is, or container, it rots down. It rots into nothing. It creates a party for maggots, and it creates houseflies. You know, it shows you directly that there's something wrong with that. It's nature's way of showing you that you're doing something unnatural by throwing food away. Okay, so yeah. Also, it's not about force feeding yourself. Oh, I bought the item, so now I have to force feed myself to eat that. No, in this case, when you buy too much, you've already caused the problem. The problem happens at the supermarket. The problem happens by being a frugal shopper and buying less, and sometimes having to order in the extra product, either to be delivered to your door if you have that luxury, or making an extra trip and getting a little bit more exercise. The next thing that I want to add to this is money. How do we how do we reduce waste in terms of our money? Well, the first thing is we avoid debt. We avoid debt at all costs. We avoid paying things in installments, and we save money so that we can pay things in full or avoid big costs so that we can continue saving. Now, this is the waste reduction side to it. The add quality side to it is going to be things like getting a promotion, starting a side business, and or investing a lot of the money that you're saving. Now, if you ask me, I would tell you that the way that people handle their money has a lot to do with their personality. They're not just habits. So we could ask 10 random people on the street what they do with their money. And when two or three say, "Oh, I save and invest," you will see a distinct difference between them and the other seven that say, "Oh, I pay my bills, and after that, there's nothing left. And sometimes I borrow money, and I get so disappointed and so angry at the interest that I have to pay." it's a it's like the mushroom. The mushroom is great. The marshmallow test. If this test was done with mushrooms, I think it wouldn't be as successful. When they get children at 5 years old to sit in a room with a marshmallow in front of them on a plate, and if they can hold off eating that marshmallow, which basically means have the inner fortitude to go without eating that, or go without that temptation, then they are presented with two extra marshmallows. Now, what happens in the test is the child who doesn't eat the marshmallow is presented with the two and is delighted. And in fact, the delight that the child receives at getting these extra two marshmallows uh, could be measured on the same level as consuming the marshmallow. Whereas when you take the child, or the majority of children, I should say, that take the marshmallow and eat the marshmallow, uh, or even part of the marshmallow, thinking that somehow they'll be granted the extra two marshmallows, and they're not, they seem to present signs of guilt, anxiety during this time in which they're eating it. So they're not enjoying the experience. And then after, there's this sense of emptiness and the sense that they're not going to be given anything else. So you can see that it's not just this tangible thing of lack or scarcity. There's something spiritual or something that works in the personality of the person so that they are going to have less in the future. Or these children, for example, it sounds a little sad, right? I agree, it sounds a little sad, but you can see this behavior in adults, and they are usually saying to themselves that, I am a person who is in debt. I'm this kind of person. Whereas people that invest money, they say, I am this kind of person. I am an investor. To make that switch, I think it's harder than just adapting a few habits. You actually need to make a mindset switch and say, I don't want to be a debt person anymore. I want to be an investment person. And therefore, getting more uh, by either chasing that promotion or putting on an extra few hours a week in the job that you're doing, and being able to make that money work for you. And then on the other end of it, saving and investing. Okay. Um, relationship, relationships with people, adding quality. How do you add quality and how do you reduce waste when we're talking about relationships with people? Well, first of all, when you reduce waste with people in your social life, the idea is that you avoid arguments that are just a question of ego. They're just a question of who is right and who is wrong, or what is right and what is wrong. We live in a world where people have silly opinions, and sometimes there is a negative result when you decide to argue about a fact, a scientific fact that you know is correct, and the other person, for example, won't accept under any circumstances. So you build a resentment with that person, and we don't actually calculate that resentment or those bad feelings that the other person will harness toward us, um, as we continue to have those unpleasant conversations with them. So one thing that I'm learning, because I'm not a pro in any of these things, I think I'm giving you this advice because these are things that I want to pick up and that I want to integrate into my life. All of them, some of them, I think I'm doing okay, but a lot of them, I think I have a lot to learn. That I'm a little bit of a child in that way. That I need to be able to predict. I need to be able to see the consequences of arguing about a political issue, or some kind of, maybe even like where that city is in that country, or what is the capital of whatever country, and there's no maps or no Google in your hand so you can prove it. It's just hearsay. Or even something sillier like, do aliens exist and do they control our governments? I'm always going to argue with people that the skeptical way is the best way, because um, otherwise you can just say basically anything. But when you start to argue with friends and colleagues and people who are in your life, you start to create that resentment. So you start to increase that waste. You're wasting the time that you have with that person, and you're wasting the opportunity to create a moment of joy or interest or fascination or just contentment with that person, because the person is not just their opinion about that subject. The person is a whole lot of other things. So how do you add quality? You focus on the things that you have in common with the person. You focus on the things that you have in common with the person, and you focus on things that you know are special about the person, or that you could learn from the person, and you build that relationship. You add quality. Now, lastly, is the relationship that we have with our significant other, or our husband, or our wife. And that works quite simply like this, that we have opportunities during the day to complain, which is a kind of waste. Of course, when we have an important complaint, when we have an important conflict to resolve, that does require us to sit down, not idly, but actually sit down and create some kind of space in which two people can communicate openly and honestly with no distractions. Otherwise, you're kidding yourself. Otherwise, you're playing some kind of game which is worthless. And that is how you deal with a complaint. You don't repeat a complaint all day to the person. You don't bring up negative things during the day to your husband or your wife and think that that's going to make a difference or make that person change. What you do is you increase the friction, you increase the conflict, and you create this portal for other bad things to come through. Some of those things are like uh, apathy, resentment, a feeling that the other person will be feeling an obligation to find the faults in you. If you're complaining about something in them, they're going to automatically uh, look at you and see that you're also not perfect, and they're going to remind you just how imperfect you are. And so, building your love relationship, or the relationship with your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your husband or your wife or whoever it is, or whoever fills that spot for you, is about finding opportunities to talk about how good they are, to focus on what they bring for you, to focus on how they make you feel in a positive way, and emphasize that. Otherwise, you need to just stop kidding yourself and either sit down and have those conversations, which could take months, or start to think about ending whatever it is that you think that you have that you don't really have. So today we went through food, money, relationships in terms of social life, and relationships in terms of love. My objective here is to show you that everything in life has this adding quality and reducing waste nature to it. Okay, it could be anything. We could be talking about career. We could be talking about your time spent in the job, and adding quality to your work or reducing waste in your work. I like to create this concept for looking at life like that, because when we see life as moments of opportunity, it instantly becomes more exciting and less boring. We spend a lot of our times looking at social media. We spend a lot of our time um, doing things that are not constructive for our life, but we don't spend a lot of time uh, reflecting on what we can actually do to add quality to different parts and reduce waste. You know, looking at our soul or our personality as if it were an organization and as if we had real goals, which we probably should, right? Anyway, that's what I would like to give to you today. If you didn't understand very well by the way that I explained, please leave a comment below, ask a question, make an observation if you feel the need. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you here at English Coach on the next one.